Hi, and welcome to Section 2-1, Using T Accounts. Today in class, we discussed that there is a new way of representing when an account increases or decreases. The old way, we'd always use a minus symbol if an account decreased, or a plus symbol if an account increased. So now we're presented with a new concept, a concept that we're going to use for the rest of the textbook. So, we have a T account in front of us. We have two sides of the T account. We have a left side, we have a right side. What we need to start doing is we need to start referring to debit and credit. Debit means the left side of the T account. Credit represents anything that's on the right side of the T account. So try to start not using the words left or not using the words right. So debit, credit. So we've learned that there are three classifications of accounts back in Chapter 1. We have assets, liabilities, and owner's equities. So each classification has a different way of how it's represented on a T account. For assets, anything that's listed on the left side of the T account or the debit side of the T account, represents an increase to the account. Anything listed on the credit side or right side of the T account represents a decrease to any asset account. The normal balance represents increase. So if increases are on the debit side, that means that the normal balance is also on the debit side. Decreases, therefore, are on the side opposite the normal balance side. In this case, assets decrease on the credit side. Next, we have liabilities. And liabilities act opposite of an asset in this case. Liabilities increase on the credit side, which therefore means the normal balance side is also on the credit side. Now, as far as decreases, that's the side opposite the normal balance side. So liabilities, such as accounts payable, would decrease as a debit. Now, owner's equity, or capital accounts, are very similar to liabilities in that they also increase as a credit, which means the normal balance side falls on the credit side, or increase side. And the decrease to a capital account would be on the side opposite the normal balance side. In this case, decreases would occur on the debit side of a T account. And for capital accounts, that can be revenue, it can be expenses, withdrawals, investments, things like that. So let's practice what this concept means, visualize it, using the 2-1 work together. And this is on page 31 in your textbook for the directions. What we need to do is we're given a set of several T accounts. We need to label each T account as the debit side and credit side, which is the same for all of them. But then we have to go ahead and list the normal balance side, which is always the increase side to any T account. So we label the normal balance side, the increase side. We also have to label the decrease side. So we're going to start with cash, which is an asset. So first, we have to label our debit and credit sides. Debit's on the left, credits are on the right. So for cash, you would say that the normal balance side or increase side would be on the debit side of the T account. The decrease side would be on the side opposite the normal balance side. So for assets, credits decrease, and debits would be increase. Next, we have accounts receivable for Christine Kelly, another asset. So we first have to label our debit and credit side. So debits again on the left, credits are on the right. So we have to label our normal balance side. Normal balance side represents the increase side to an asset account. So that would be on the debit. And the decrease, which would be the opposite side of the normal balance, that would be on the credit side. So accounts receivable would increase as debits, they would decrease as credits. Supplies, another asset, once again, label the debit side, label the credit side. So for supplies, you would say that the increase or normal balance side of the T account would fall on the debit side. And the decrease to a supplies, which would be on the side opposite the normal balance, that would fall on the credit side. So if supplies increased, I would list it as a debit. Next, we have prepaid insurance. Once again, label your debit side, label your credit side. Also another asset, so therefore our normal balance side, which would be the debit side or increase side, and then the decrease side to prepaid insurance would be on the credit side. So if I paid cash for insurance, I would list that amount on the debit side because that's an increase. Next, we have our liabilities. These appear in the upper right corner of your screen. The first liability we have is accounts payable for Miller Supplies. So we first need to label our debit side and label our credit side. So for liabilities, this is the opposite of an asset. Liabilities would increase on the credit side, so we would say our normal balance is listed on the credit side. And our decrease side would be the side opposite the normal balance, which would be on the debit side. So for accounts payable, it increases as a credit. Accounts payable decreases as a debit. Once again, we have another accounts payable, this time for Wayne office supplies. So we label our debits and credits. Just like we did, the increase to accounts payable, which would be on the credit side, and also that's the normal balance side. The decrease to accounts payable, which would be on the debit side. So accounts payable increases as a credit. Accounts payable decreases as a debit. The last one is capital, owner's equity. Just like a liability, functions the same way as far as debits and credits go. So we're going to have our debits on the left, credits on the right. So normal balance, or the increased side, which would be the credit side. The decreased side, which would be the side opposite the normal balance, that falls on the debit side of the T account. So we had an owner that made an investment into their business. You would say that would increase as a credit. If the owner withdrew money from the business, you would list that as a debit to represent a decrease. So you're going to go ahead now and you're going to complete the 2-1 on your own, just like we did here. The directions are also on page 31. When you're finished with that, you're going to move on to your 2-1 application problem. This is on page 46 in your textbook for the directions. Very similar to a T count, but they want a little bit more of a detailed response as to how an account increases and decreases. So you have to label the account title, the account classification. You have to indicate the account's normal balance side and increase side, which would be the same answer for both. And then you would have to indicate the account's decrease side. So they've given us the first one for us, the example. The first one is cash, which is an asset. So for assets, the normal balance and the increase side all happen to be debits. For an asset, the decrease side, which is the opposite of the normal balance side, which should be on the credit side. So cash increases as a debit, cash decreases as a credit. We'll do the next one together to get you kind of a start here. The next account title they give us is Accounts Receivable for Jens Olfsen. Notice how this account title is abbreviated. So instead of writing out the entire word receivable, you can just abbreviate your receivable as REC. And instead of writing the entire word accounts, you can just write it as ACCTS, just to shorten that a little bit. You can also do it another way as A/R, that also represents accounts receivable. But in either case, you definitely need to write out the owner's name in full. So we have Jens Olfsen, accounts receivable. Accounts receivable is another asset. Assets increase as debits, so our normal balance also debit. The decrease side to an asset, which would be the opposite side of the normal balance side, which is a credit. So accounts receivable increases as debit, accounts receivable decreases as credit. So you're going to follow this pattern throughout the remaining portion of the 2-1 application problem. Don't forget, the PowerPoints are listed on my website for further detailed instructions and further detailed lecture. The 3 assignments are also listed on my website as well, on northbiz.weebly.com. Thanks again, and we will see you in class.